Okay, welcome back, everybody. Final session of the event. I want to just congratulate everyone that is registered for this event, for just participating and learning from this incredible group of speakers that we've had over the last couple of days. And with that, I also want to make sure that Kayleen and Bridget and Gwen and Devin Torres know just like how wonderful this program was, and I've just really benefited from this one, and I'm sure that all of you out in the audience have too. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and hide myself from the stage and let the host of this panel, Kayleen Holt, take over.
All right, thank you, Louise. Welcome back, everyone. My name is Kayleen Holt. I am a white woman with dark blonde, long hair, wearing a teal dress and teal framed glasses, sitting in a room with bookshelves behind me and some comfy armchairs that I'd like to go to later and read a book. I am an instructional design consultant. I have a small agency. I've been doing instructional design work for about 17 years, and altogether, I came from public education earlier than that. So altogether, a little over 25 years in education, and first started learning about accessibility in 2007. But as I mentioned yesterday in our panel discussion, when I first started learning about it, it was really more from a compliance standpoint with Section 508, because I was working with a lot of government agencies, and not really from the inclusion standpoint, which is where we really need to be. And I guess I learned a lot of wrong things along the way. So now I'm trying to learn to do things better and do things right. So I'm really excited to have a conversation with these panelists. We're going to be talking about what the future of accessibility looks like. So I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves, and then we'll go from there. By the way, my pronouns are she, her. I figured out how to list that in my name. I just put it at the end of my last name. So little tip there for anybody else who wants to do the same. All right, I will start with Chuck Adams. Please introduce yourself for us.
Thank you. I'm Chuck Adams. I am white male with mostly receded hairline. It's not quite all the way gone yet. And a gray shirt. In the background is my home office and a 3D printer in the background, which is one of my hobbies. I work for Oracle in the Accessibility Program Office, and here today as a panelist, I'm a member of the Accessibility Guidelines Working Group, co-chair from the W3C.
Thank you. We're excited to have you here. All right. If you were in our last session, you may already be familiar with Chris, but just in case you weren't, Chris, would you please introduce yourself? My neighbor here in Oklahoma.
Exactly. Hi, my name is Chrisana Paxton McMillan. My preferred name is Chris. I'm a white female in my early mid-ish 50s. I wear glasses, have graying blonde hair. My pronouns are she or her. I'm in my office with my bookshelves that are filled behind me with books. And I own D3 Training Solutions, and we do custom e-learning development. I've been in the training field for probably 30 years, and first started doing accessibility back in 99. I was blessed to work at a very large international communications company, and we included accessibility in all of our distance learning courses. Now, granted, that was primarily sign language interpreters and closed captioning because it was basically video, but it is amazing to see how far we've come with inclusion and accessibility. So.
All right, great, thank you. And I see Oklahoma State University represented there. That's where
my
master's is from, so we can be friends.
Yes,
I'm kidding.
Go Pokes.
I do not follow football and honestly don't care, but
I don't either. Except the social aspect. I like the fun part.
Right. My neighbor is a diehard Sooners fan, and so my husband makes sure he puts on an OSU, the orange shirt, when he mows, just to irritate my neighbor. So anyway, I'll go to Alan next.
Hello, my name is Alan Nadachu, Native American male in his early 40s. I have wireframe glasses with long hair braided in 2 braids along the side. I'm wearing a purple shirt. My background is a mixture between some fun toys I like to keep in my office as well as books.
Love those toys. I also love your braids. All right. Star, would you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. I'm Star Peterson. I'm a white, femme presenting person in my early 40s, and my background is a public library. I taught special ed for years. My master's is in severe disabilities special education. And then when I pivoted to instructional design, I also became a diversity trainer. So I specialize in teaching workplaces how to be more accommodating for people with concealable disabilities and for the LGBTQ community.
Great, thank you. I love the mix of backgrounds we have here. And yes, Bridget says, "Yay for libraries!" Yeah, yeah. If you joined our panel discussion yesterday, you'll notice Star dropped off at some point. We're guessing they lost internet connectivity, and so they were fortunate enough to have a library that let them use their space. So that's awesome. All right, so I'm going to start by asking the first question. I'll answer it myself first, and that is, what do you think the future of accessibility looks like, or what do you hope the future of accessibility looks like? And I'm going to answer that second question because I honestly don't know. I'm not on the inside like Chuck there. I don't know where things are going right now, but I hope that more organizations see the value of accessibility and understand, to reiterate what Chris said in her panel or in her session, you can't do inclusion without accessibility. There's a t-shirt that I can't remember exactly what it says, but inclusion without accessibility isn't, basically, if you're talking about inclusion and you're not talking about disabilities, you're doing it wrong. And so I'm hoping, and the direction I'm taking my company is that all companies, all organizations that design learning experiences will build in accessibility from the beginning. I don't even want to give my clients an option. I don't want to ask. I don't ask, do you want this accessible? I'm just like, we're going to make it accessible. Now, I haven't been perfect at that. There are things I'm still learning to do. There are things that I maybe haven't been able to do with certain clients, but that's where I want to go, is everything is going to be as accessible as I can make it. So, Alan, I'm going to go to you next. What do you think the future of accessibility looks like, or what do you hope it looks like?
The future of accessibility, I think we're going to see more machine learning, but I don't think it will ever be perfect. It won't match the level that a human can give a project. And however, it will help us make things more accessible, either by identifying things that need to be identified, or being able to recognize something. Like they already do it now with cameras and augmented reality. You point something, it could tell you what it is, like plant identification apps. You point at it, it tells you what plant it is. I see a lot more of that in the future of accessibility. I saw meme of Star Trek, and it said something to the effect like, accessibility will be accommodated without questions and without questions and with empathy.
Thank you.
I'm getting
Empathy
that
is so
wrong,
important.
I'm getting that quote wrong, but yeah, that's one.
That's fine. I got the t-shirt quote wrong too, but it's
Well,
fine.
it sounds like a riff off of
enough.
the Borg. You will be assimilated. You will be accessible.
I love it. I love that we have some fellow Star Trek nerds here too. Yes, you will be accessible. Oh gosh. I could pull in the Doctor Who's Cybermen too. And the Daleks. I don't know. Okay. Chuck, since you spoke up there, let me just ask you, what do you think the future of accessibility looks like?
Sure, I'm going to talk a little bit about WCAG 3 here, because that's where our efforts are and where we hope accessibility goes. And we have a lot of aspirational motivations for WCAG 3. I'm going to start out that WCAG 2 was successful and it remains a success, and we'll be releasing 2.2 here shortly. But it didn't meet all of the challenges that all of the users face. And what we're hoping to do with WCAG 3 is make digital products more accessible and usable by more people with disabilities. We hope to support a wider range of user needs that we weren't necessarily able to meet with WCAG 2. And we hope to provide new and innovative ways to test content and make sure that it meets the needs of individuals. We hope that we can do more frequent maintenance and update of the guidelines. We were talking in the back room before about the infrequency of the updates that have come with WCAG 2. And we're hoping that WCAG 3 can be more iterative and be more responsive to the accelerating technology changes that are occurring, as Ellen had mentioned regarding, machine learning and AI. Also, we hope to make it easier for individuals, for beginners and experts, to take these principles, these guidelines, and to create digital accessible content. Right now, there's a lot of people that feel that there's a lot of expertise that's needed, and we're hoping that we can make it easier to understand and easier to use. So we want it to be transformative from the ground up, and we're reworking it. We're also reworking the way that the Accessibility Guidelines Working Group works together in order to accomplish these goals. I hope that we are successful, and this is where accessibility goes in the future. And then sort of unscripted on the side here too, Alan, you were mentioning where you hope accessibility goes. It's interesting that in the last couple of years, there's been an emphasis placed on remote learning, and we've learned a lot about how important accessibility is, and where with the current regulations, the current standards, there's still some gaps. And I hope that we can close those gaps, and that that's the benefit from the last 2 years that the world has faced, that we've been able to really emphasize the importance of accessibility.
I love it. And I will be coming back to you for some more follow-up talk about WCAG 3 and all of that. It's exciting stuff. All right, Chris. Oh, and by the way, when you're not speaking, it helps to mute, because sometimes we'll get an echo or random dog barks. I've got some dogs in my office behind me, so it may happen, but it helps to keep yourself muted if you're not talking. All right, so Chris, what do you think the future of accessibility looks like?
Well, thank you. I had my screen minimized, so I couldn't see the mute button, but yes, that was my dog saying hello. In my mind, I really want to put us out of speaking engagements for this, and that would be we've met accessible e-learning when we have put ourselves out of work, in the sense that we don't have to specialize in it. We don't have to do these conferences. We don't have to do any of this, because it's just a given, and that would be amazing. Otherwise, I'm doing what Kayleen's doing. All of my courses, even my clients who say they don't want accessibility or they don't need it, everything is at least has been meeting level A, some of them level AA. But I think the biggest thing, and I hope that comes from it, is that we can get rid of that horrible myth that is out there that says designing content that is accessible harms the learning experience for everyone, and that it's boring if it's accessible. That opinion is based on the belief that accessible learning can't be visually engaging, interactive, and innovative, and we know that is wrong.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. But yeah, it kind of goes back to our talk yesterday about misconceptions. And the agency that I talked about that believed that everything had to be black and white to be accessible. And that's where these misconceptions come into play, is someone interprets guidelines wrong and they say, well, you can't do this, you can't do that. And they focus on all the things you can't do, or they think you can't do, instead of focusing on what you can do. Really, in e-learning, what I see is, okay, drag and drops are out. I'm not going to cry about that. Big deal. There are plenty of other ways to have interactions rather than.
And there's a workaround to that to make it look like a drag and drop.
I've seen some really creative workarounds if you know how to do it. And so I appreciate you mentioning that in your session, Chris. All right, Star, please.
My hope is that in the future we'll consider concealable disabilities more than we currently do, including neurodiverse learners. I'm hoping that we'll look for in-person training at the training environment and make sure it's friendly to people with sensory processing disorders. I see that happening more. My big dream is that it would just be standard to have people with disabilities test out any kind of new training product, not just an app that mimics a screen reader, someone who is using a screen reader. And I don't know of a lot of people who do that. I know of one company that does that, but I'm hoping that that'll just become the standard that everyone assumes is included in their budget for making any kind of training.
I love that. Yes. I know that there are companies that provide people with disabilities who are testers for, e-learning or websites or whatever else. And I want to get to where I'm using those. Yeah. OLED Media is one of them. Yeah. We had a presenter yesterday, Bello. That's one of them. I found a couple more recently. If I get a chance, I'll look for those and plop those in the chat. But it's really important. But what you said about, building it into your budget is also really important, because as much as I want everything to be as accessible as possible, I also have a budget, and I can't, go completely broke hiring companies to do this sort of thing if my clients aren't paying me enough to do it. And it's not, I don't want to charge extra for accessibility. I don't want to, like, it should be baked in, it should be built in. But it's also, why is someone going to hire me to do something if my cost is so much higher than everybody else's? I don't know. Chris, how do you handle that sort of dilemma?
I have a lot, again, I only build my accessible courses in Lectora because I find it easier. And I have a lot of those library objects that are pre-built over the years. And that way I can plug them in. So I'm pretty fast at it. And I just build it in, and most of them, again, this one Fortune 100 company that is, I think Kayleen, you and I have each talked about them in the oil and gas business. They don't even realize their courses are accessible, because they specifically said they don't need it. And it's like, well, they're going to be anyway.
Yeah, and that's another really common misconception, is we don't need it to be accessible because we don't have users with disabilities, or person with disabilities couldn't do this job. Well, guess what? I bet they could, and I know you do. I know you have people in your organization with disabilities. It's just, as Star calls them, concealable disabilities. I prefer the term hidden disabilities, but either way, it's the same thing. It's, you look at me and you don't know that I have disabilities, but I have several. And people don't always report that they have disabilities, because there's a lot of stigma attached to that. There are potential career ramifications attached to that. People aren't going to tell you, but you just need to assume that, yes, your users need these things. And so many things like captions make it a better experience, even for people who don't have disabilities. It's that curb cut effect that Meryl Evans, that we talked about yesterday, talks about all the time. Yeah. Anyone have anything to add to that conversation?
I think that in the future, what my hope is that it'll also be so standardized to add options that people won't have to self-disclose. Again, because I would say most, if they don't have to disclose, do not, my personal experience. Because like you said, there is that stigma. My hope is that in the future, things like, let's say, white noise machines or ear canceling headphones, or things that some people would help some people and don't help others, are just available to everyone. And it's not seen as like, oh, you had to ask permission for that, or, you're the only one using it. Just a lot, again, which in the end makes it more accessible, right? You don't have to prove a disability in order to get these accommodations.
Absolutely. And while we're talking about that, something I didn't realize years ago when I was struggling to get accommodations is, when you request accommodations, you don't have to disclose what your disability is exactly. You don't have to tell them your diagnosis. If they ask you for a doctor's note, the doctor's note doesn't have to have your diagnosis. It just needs to say what accommodations you need to be successful. So that little tip would have helped me out a lot several years ago. But it led me to freelancing. So I'm glad for it now. We had a question from Michelle Jackson. Says, I'm looking to add screen readers / accessibility testers to my team. What are some resources where I can find someone? And I know OLED Media was one of them. I'll take a moment and look for those others that I bookmarked. If anyone else wants to take that question, if you know some companies.
Well, I will say, to be honest, Oracle, being a large company, we do employ a wide and diverse set of individuals. So we do have a lot of in-house expertise in that regards, which I know does not answer the question, but at least we're very fortunate to work with a number of individuals who are native assistive technology users, and that has been a very, very beneficial and positive experience.
Nice, thank you. I looked at my bookmarks and put a couple more besides OLED Media, which I guess we didn't list the website for that, so I'll put that down too. But some others where you can find digital, accessibility testers. Now, I haven't personally used these companies. They're companies that I ran across as I was looking. I follow a lot of people with disabilities and a lot of people who are accessibility activists, and so these just came up from what shows up in my feed. So we'll see. I see that Colleen shared microassist.com as well. Thank you.
I've personally worked with OLED Media and highly recommend them. Their testers have a wide range of disabilities and are very thorough.
Nice, thank you.
I feel like they're really committed to looking at the big picture of accessibility and not just checking off a few boxes on a checklist to get compliance. They look to far exceed the standard, the legal standards, so that it's, they're going for a grade A, not just a C.
Nice. We had another question from Maureen that says, a continuing frustration is that third-party vendors, publishers, are not required to guarantee accessible content addressing higher ed environment. Any thoughts on how to make a change to make it a requirement?
I would say that depends on the contract. I teach at a higher education locally, and we actually require our vendors, if we're using them, it's written into the contract. In fact, I'm actually also a vendor there, and I'm doing a tornado virtual reality course. And in order for us to finish it, we, that's the part I'm doing right now, is adding the accessibility. But eventually, we'll be doing, the active shooter and the fire and things like that. So I think it's just a requirement you've got to do on your end.
Yeah, just keep pushing for it. And like Diane Elkins mentioned yesterday in her session, if the word accessibility, she said the word accessibility has a lot of baggage to it a lot of the time. If you're not getting anywhere talking about accessibility, then talk about access. Who needs access to this professional development opportunity? And I love the way she phrased it in another session at a previous TLDC event, which was, who deserves access to this learning experience? When you think about it that way, it's hard to say no to accessibility. So, Chris, you mentioned working on some VR stuff. I want to talk about VR and AR. Who's doing that sort of thing, and how do you make it accessible? So, Chris, I'll start with you.
And I'm going to say I'm still learning, just even with the VR and doing the inclusions. And I sent you a link, Kayleen, earlier about, there's a lawsuit going on, because I think right now there's a lot of VR companies that have taken the stance that, well, it's virtual reality, we don't need to. Or they've done, well, there's other alternatives that you can use, so that it doesn't have to be that way. But we shouldn't. Again, we work hard on our content. We want it to be accessible for everybody. So right now, what I'm working on at the moment is going through and creating and we're just playing with it to try to figure out how to get it to work. But we're going through, adding closed caption basing, show, hey, you're walking this way, here we're doing this, but then we're also looking at updating so it follows along with the audio that's being said, and then adding in kind of those descriptions. Okay, you're now out in the hallway. This is what you're seeing. Now, depending on which campus you're on, this is what you might see, blah, blah, blah. And in many cases, I'm really thinking in the long run, this will help us for all of our, because I can't do a VR tornado evacuation for all 4 campuses from every classroom on all 4 campuses. So I'm really looking at this as a great way to kind of describe, no matter what campus you're on, this is what you will see. And we'll let you know. I'm sure someone else has much more experience than I do on that part.
Anyone else been working in VR and AR?
I just posted a link in there to some draft content that there's a working group in the W3C called the Accessible Platform Architectures Working Group, and they've put together presently this draft guidance on making content accessible for users in the XR space. And I'm not personally a member of that group, but I wanted to pitch some of their work. So W3C's definitely been involved in this space.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much, Chuck. Yeah, be digging into that. I haven't personally worked on any of the VR. Well, I guess I did work on a VR course. Well, I don't know if it qualifies as VR. It was like 3D environment, but it's not the goggles and all that stuff. So I don't think that's VR. But I left the company before that project was finished, so I'm not sure how that ended up. It's interesting though. I can see that any sort of extended reality experience is going to have some accessibility challenges. And as someone with vestibular disorder, I don't know that I could ever do actual VR. AR, sure, but all the motion, that can be a problem for many of us. Yes, Chris.
I cannot use the headsets, and there's actually an article I was reading earlier talking about the headsets aren't voice user to aren't friendly to some types of hairstyles, making people feel awkward, embarrassing people having to use it with glasses. All of my VR classes can be used either, of course, they can use their goggles. That's probably kind of one of the last things I test, but it can be done on a computer using their mouse to get around. Or again, if it's a tablet, using the touch board to get around, because I get a little nauseous using VR headsets.
Yeah,
I have a sensory processing disorder, and just the feeling of it touching my head is so distracting. Like I can't wear any kind of goggles.
Yeah, I can't either. I can't wear headphones like Chuck's got on. I can't wear hair barrettes most of the days. But so Teresa says, we still have a long way to go, but we recently did our first VR project in mental health, and we created a downloadable desktop version for users that would not be able to use the headset keyboard friendly. I love it. And I think that brings up a really, really important point is having those multiple paths, those multiple options, because a single solution is probably never going to work for everyone. Now, I think that I have to put a caveat in there, because sometimes I've seen companies with a compliance focus do maybe a print version of an e-learning course because, oh, well, that's accessible, but it's not the same experience. So it takes you back to a kind of separate but equal conversation. So you still have to think about how to be inclusive, and are you taking the lazy way out, or are you doing what's really right for the learners? Like the option that Teresa mentioned sounds like a good option. Like that really works, because if you have people who can't do the motion or can't wear the headsets and stuff, that's I guess an equal experience. Anybody else have thoughts on that?
Speaking of equal VR experiences, I remember seeing someone's trying to develop a tap cane that you can use in a VR setting. You can tap it, and then it will identify the objects in that virtual 3D space.
That's cool.
Xbox has a adaptive controller, which has buttons that you could program, and you could use that to move around in a 3D space. Because right now, when you do the goggles, you also have the things for your hands, and that would be another alternative for someone to navigate in that space and interact with that space using that kind of device. And as I'm thinking about VR and how to make it more accessible, right now the tools are not available to us to really make it well, immersive. But by making it immersive, we can make it more accessible. When you look inside the headset, uh, you're looking at a specific camera view, camera angle, and they try to mimic how your eyes see. And if you turn off one eye, well, you can still see it's not quite immersed. That 3D effect's not there, but you can still see. But sometimes if you get that camera angle off, that's where you get into that motion sickness. That's where you get into those things that don't make VR feel right. And with the headsets, there's stereo sound. You could hear to the left or to the right. But if we were to open it up to 360 audio, then we'd be able to tell, oh, this is where that thing is coming from, or this is where I'm hearing that. And how do we replicate that experience for someone who can't hear out of one ear? I have one more thing on that, and give me a moment. Go ahead and go on, but I'll think about it.
Okay. Well, I'm looking at the Q&A panel now, and Donna asked about this topic that we're on. Seems to be a big push towards immersive virtual reality learning. Not sure how to make this accessible. My department is asking to start using it, but I'm on the fence. What are your thoughts? And Stephanie says, I want to hear about this too. It seems like VR is inherently not accessible to everyone. I love the option that Teresa mentioned. Anyone have anything to add to answer Donna's question?
We need to look to video games.
Yes.
There's already 3D worlds. Some companies are doing a good job of trying to recreate that 3D world in an accessible format. I don't have any knowledge, and that was the third thing I wanted to touch base on. Was what can we borrow from video game design, specifically 3D video game design, that we could leverage in our VR development. The thing is, those type of tools are very expensive and very proprietary. We need the price of those tools to come down and be able to be affordable to us. And we need the technology that allows us to experience VR to be accessible to all through a price point. That's where I'm talking about accessibility in that way. Google recently killed off their Google Cardboard. You could still do experiences with Google Cardboard. You can still find headsets, but they're no longer supporting that platform. That was one of the easiest entry points into VR. Because if you had a phone, you could put it inside a box and hold it up to your eyes. I like I found the tiny world's smallest VR headset. You just pop it in there. Don't even have to put on a headset or anything. You just hold it up like a mask, and it will give you a similar experience. But accessibility in terms of price.
Interesting. Alan, do you know who in the L&D community we could follow to learn more about virtual reality and those sorts of experiences and how to do them well?
Not off the top of my head, but give me a moment to check out my LinkedIn feed, and I can put some people in the chat for us.
Awesome. Thank you. Just put you on the spot there. Does anyone else have anybody that you know of?
The Vanderbilt University has done quite a bit of VR, and since they're university, they're working to make it's pretty inclusive, and especially in their nursing department. I've seen some presentations they've done and it's to kind of replace the ultrasound machines and some of the other ones. I mean, nurses were having to go in day and night, so they created these VR programs, and it took a year putting it all together, but it is a really amazing program, and that's through Vanderbilt.
Nice. Thank you. And Kathy mentioned in the chat, Microsoft's Inclusive Design Tech Lab is doing a lot of research in adaptive tech. So posted the link there. Thank you, Kathy. And Teresa says there's a gentleman named Skip and he is well known. Someone may know who I'm talking about. I don't know. Does anyone know? All right. So if anybody finds that out, pop it in the chat. And a website about video games that reviews games for accessibility. Oh, thank you, Dawn. That is awesome. Okay, lovely. I'm going to go to the Q&A panel or Q&A again. What is the future of accessibility in a Web 3.0 environment? That's from Sharon. And I will admit my ignorance there. I remember way back when we were talking about Web 2.0, I don't know what Web 3.0 is. So I'm going to look to our panelists. Who can answer that one?
Sorry, that's an unfamiliar term to me as well. I'm taking some notes. I'm going to have to drill down because it feels like, boy, I bet I should know that.
Right? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what Web 3.0 is. But I will take the opportunity to ask Chuck to follow up on giving us a little sneak peek at what WCAG 3 is going to be all about and why have we moved to 3.0 now instead of just doing like a 2.3? What is the difference in the, how does it move it up to a whole new number?
The reason it goes to a whole new number is because, we found that WCAG 2 has a certain conformance model, and that has worked well for the time. But we will admit that WCAG 2 hasn't addressed all the needs that various individuals, that a lot of people have in the community. And we're hoping to address those with WCAG 3 and expand some of the guidelines that we can provide and cover more individuals, such as cognitive issues. Now, there are some standards that specifically target cognitive, but WCAG 2, it's been challenging to get some of the guidance that our working groups and our supporting teams have come to us and said, can you create guidance for this particular need? And it just didn't fit very well in WCAG 2. And we're hoping that WCAG 3 can be a little bit more robust and address these wider ranges. And I don't want to target any one particular group like cognitive issues, but that is one of the inspirations for which we're trying to improve upon it so that it can cover this wider range. And I had mentioned earlier before, WCAG 2 is not fast. So why isn't there going to be a WCAG 2.3? We're finding diminishing returns. That the guidelines that we're asked to create, because I said they don't necessarily fit, well, our releases are producing fewer and fewer additional standard success criteria. And we want WCAG 3 to be able to address a lot of the requirements that have come to us that we haven't been able to do in WCAG 2. And again, I want to stress WCAG 2 has been very successful, but it's a step along the path. And we're hoping that the next step is a big leap in how we can address the requirements and the standards and the guidelines for accessibility.
Wonderful, thank you. As someone who has some cognitive issues from a head injury, I appreciate that because I've seen some gaps in the current standards. And we've got all sorts of things listed in the chat about Web 3.0. So I look forward to digging into those later and learning more about that.
I also found a resource for L&D professionals. There's a Slack group, XR and LXD. Nice. I posted a link to that. 200 members strong. They have a monthly meetup. They also have design challenges, and it's a good resource for people interested in VR, AR, mixed reality.
Thank you so much, Alan. That's fabulous. Awesome. Okay. So Sharon also asks, are there any moves by developer tool companies to make it easier to create accessible sites, i.e. make it less of an effort or even effortless? Wouldn't that be great? I think what Chris was sharing about Lectora is that it's fairly easy, right, to create accessible courses with Lectora. Does anyone know other developer tools that are making it easy for us? Someone mentioned
will-
Domino, I think, in the last session too.
I would put a plug in for Domino also. I haven't looked at Camtasia's new release. It's been a long time since they've really redone, but supposedly, from my accessibility group I'm on, they have really done a lot of attention and helped in that area with the new version of Captivate. Not Camtasia, sorry.
Okay. I was wondering, I have the new Camtasia, but I haven't fully explored what's different in it. I know captions have always been pretty easy to work with in Camtasia. Now, Captivate, I would love to see it become really, really user-friendly, because it's powerful, but I went away from using it because it wasn't user-friendly to me, and it was just so much of a hassle to do things that I thought should be easy. So I'm looking forward to when that new version comes out.
I do want to mention something here. I'm not here to pitch any Oracle products. We know that it's very important that the tech stacks used to build these applications are in and of themselves accessible. One of the things that I've always advocated is that accessibility is not something that you get for free. If you're working on a tech stack that is accessible by default, that does not necessarily mean that the applications that you're building or that the content that you're producing with it is going to inherit all the accessibility, because there's still a lot of developer choices and options that individuals can make that will introduce barriers. So there's still work to be done by the content authors, and they should be cognizant of that they're not going to get accessibility for free if they're working on a tech stack that is accessible out of the box.
That is such an important point, because we will still always have to do things like, putting in meaningful alt text. PowerPoint wants to suggest our alt text for us. It's almost never right. I guess it's something, but no. And things like making sure our colors that we use have the right contrast. And I love that the newer standards are getting more specific about color choices. There is something called, and I'll have to look it up again, Advanced Perceptual Contrast Algorithm. And I tried to read about it, and it kind of went over my head a little bit, but APCA is something that's coming, I suppose, because so many times the current algorithms or whatever that are used in determining does this pass a color contrast check can be a little off with some choices. Like, it doesn't look like there's enough contrast with some choices. And I think that's getting better. Chuck, do you have anything to add about that in particular?
Yes, I do. Did I look like I was chomping at the bit? So WCAG 2 uses some research that has aged, and we understand our understanding of perception has increased, has evolved, and we're hoping that newer standards will take advantage of this. We are aware of APCA, and we are actively pursuing independent research on it in the Accessibility Guidelines Working Group. So we're hoping to get third-party review and other research to help guide us in helping advance the perception guidelines and standards.
Nice, thank you. I posted a link in the chat to an APCA contrast calculator. I don't know much about it yet. I've just played with it a little bit, but it's in beta. So it's another contrast checker that uses APCA instead of the old algorithm, I guess. All right, and Luis posted a link, said Monique St. Paul, who does a regular podcast with TLDC, also does immersive VR learning production. So, and then Alan posted another. So be sure and grab those links. And I will just go ahead and put a plug for my blog. I'll be posting a recap of this on Monday at scissortailcs.com. And I will put those links in there too for the resources. And I will also send those links to Luis in case he wants to provide that as a resource at TLDC's website. All right, so other questions. I know we are at 1:45 Central Time. So I want to get through this quickly, but I also don't want to leave questions unanswered if we have the time, if people want to hang out. Sasa, I apologize if I didn't pronounce that correctly, asks advice for institutions not caring for accessible design, yet their product will impact users statewide. I'm guessing, not caring about accessible design. Again, I'd go back to that question from Diane Elkins. Who deserves access to the learning experiences you're developing? Who deserves to get better at their job? Because that's what we're doing, is we're helping people get better at their jobs. Does anyone on the panel have anything to add to that?
In support of making content accessible, the United Nations has made accessibility a human right. And
I love that.
This is, we face this a lot, organizations or groups that don't necessarily understand the importance of accessibility. And there are no easy solutions to that, but it's advancements like United Nations making it a human right that will help make this more mainstream, which we all spoke to at the very beginning, how we'd like to see it as it's not an afterthought. Of course it's accessible.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And last question we have in the Q&A from Attila. Can industry-wide used and known terms be changed through training / e-learning if the need for change doesn't come from within the industry? And I'm not sure what sorts of terms we're talking about, so if you can maybe clarify in the chat, that might be helpful. But I mean, I think we in learning and development can always be a force for change. I've written about that before in my blog, about how we can support, racial equity. Well, we can support disability inclusion as well in the, inclusive language we use, all of that stuff. Anyone have anything to add to that?
I would, because she added some additional information, and that's kind of part of my chat that I talk about. Yes, I challenge everyone to take this on to themselves. Even if the industry isn't saying that we need to stop calling it a master bedroom, it is the primary bedroom. Instead, I mean, there's so many terms that are wrong. I have no other way
Yes.
of saying it. And, you gave great example, the black hat, white hat, actually
Yeah.
using the accurate terminology, such as malicious attacker, ethical hacker, and using the proper terminology. And so I think that falls on all of us, that we do it kind of almost from a ground level, ground roots effort, and that then hopefully maybe they'll realize, because I have to hope from some of the responses I've gotten from people who are like, they had no idea about the term grandfather clause, and they never thought about Jude people down, and some of these terminologies that are just wrong. And that's, again, hopefully where, again, speaking up and speaking out, we can all make a difference there.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. And we are in the business of educating others. So we need to do it, even if we haven't been tasked with creating a course on inclusive language. That's still our role, to educate people about these sorts of things. All right. I don't see any other questions. Any closing thoughts from any of our panelists? Anything else you want to make sure that you say?
I would just add one group of learners that we often don't think about accessibility for are learners who are incarcerated. There are a lot of people taking high school equivalency classes, finance classes, parenting classes, and that's a big chunk of people who don't necessarily have access to the internet. And I think a lot of what we make, in e-learning assumes you can click on a link or you can just look up a word you don't recognize, and I feel like they get left out a lot.
That's so true. Thank you, Star. All right. Well, thank you to all of you, all these wonderful panelists. This has been such a fabulous conversation, and I enjoyed hearing from every one of you, as well as the folks in the chat. So many great resources. And remember, you can immediately access this recording, including the chat, for probably about a week right here in AirMeet. Just go to the schedule, and then Luis will move the recordings somewhere else. And unfortunately, I think we lose the chat then, but that's where, I'll gather up the lists of links and make those available to Luis. So you can do with them what you will.
Thanks. No, AirPlay has this feature where it's like post event, you can come back and watch the recordings. I'll just leave that on for as long as I can. And then once I get all the videos formatted and stuff, I'll gather them, post them on, I don't know, either Vimeo or YouTube, and then share a page where they'll all be so everyone can check them out. There's just great stuff the last couple of days. It was really, really amazing. So yeah, we need to get this out. And again, congratulations for attending and just registering, being part of the event. It's just, that you're helping do better work. And this is important stuff.
Absolutely. And remember those tables in the lounge are out there. If anybody wants to hang out and chat a little bit longer, I'll go sit at one for a little bit. It was a really great conference. Thank you so much, Luis.
Absolutely. I do want to mention, if anybody, I do regular broadcasts through TLDC. So if anyone has any interest at all in sharing some knowledge, as a topic they want to talk about, hit me up. Just reach out to me on Slack or through the TLDC website or even the AIDC website. You can all that stuff just filters through me. Be happy to talk to you in a broadcast or a podcast. And yeah, just look for more stuff coming from us. We're just we're very excited to keep doing this. And with that, I'm going to end the session. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks again.